Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Accessible eLearning Best Practices. My name is Dan Doggett with the Maryland Department of Disabilities, and today we're going to talk about how we can build more inclusive, effective, and professional learning experiences for everyone. If this is your first time with us, welcome. The Maryland Department of Disabilities holds monthly webinars on various topics related to digital accessibility and assistive technology. So we're happy to see you here. So today we're going to take a look at digital accessibility broadly and talk about the unique ways that we as learning designers solve for and interact with it when building our training. For today's training, I'll be doing demonstrations using Storyline 360 as a reference. So I'll be showing specific examples there, but many of these can be useful on any platform that you're developing for. Before we dive in, here are a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, we do have live captioning available today. You can access them via the Zoom meeting control toolbar. Also, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel for future reference. We will send out an email to all registrants with the link once we have it up. And lastly, feel free to add your comments and questions to the chat or Q&A, and I'll do my best to address those throughout the session, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end to either go over some things or answer any questions you have. Okay, let's get started. So to begin our training today, let's establish a key point, and that is that accessibility needs to be a fundamental part of our work, not an optional add-on. It must be integrated into every project from the beginning rather than treated as a final feature. And here's the great part. When you design with accessibility, you almost always improve the experience for everyone. The best analogy I could give is the example of curb cutouts on sidewalks. So these were originally accessibility infrastructure designed for people with physical disabilities, but they also improve the experience for many other types of people, like parents with strollers, delivery people, or with hand carts and many other things, bicyclists. So when we talk about accessibility, who are we actually designing for? Well, it's a much broader group than most people think. And we're designing for a spectrum of different disabilities, which can be permanent, temporary, or even situational. So for our visual learners, this includes people who are blind and might use screen readers, as well as those with low vision who might use screen magnifiers, or even those who are colorblind. For our auditory learners, we're thinking about users who are deaf or hard of hearing and might rely on captions or transcripts. For motor disabilities, we're focused on learners who cannot use a mouse and depend entirely either on a keyboard or other assistive devices to navigate. And lastly, for our cognitive disabilities, we're designing for clarity and predictability to help learners with dyslexia, ADHD, or memory challenges. So most digital accessibility laws are based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG. And while the full guidelines are pretty comprehensive, they're built on 4 core principles. An easy way to remember them is the acronym POUR, which stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So when we say perceivable, we think about whether users can perceive the information. So this principle covers things like providing text alternatives for images or captions for videos. When we talk about operable, we're asking, can a user interact with all of the components and navigation of our training? This means ensuring everything works with a keyboard, not just with a mouse. For understandable, we want to make sure that the content and interface is easy to understand. So This involves using clear language and creating predictable, consistent navigation throughout our courses. And lastly, robust. Can the content be reliably interpreted on various devices, browsers, and assistive technology like screen readers? So that is poor. And here in Maryland, our required standard is the WCAG 2.1 AA. So this is the standard mandated for local and state governments by Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we're not going to dive deeper into the specifics of WCAG today, but I will provide some resources at the end of the session if you'd like to learn more as well. So many of us on the call today are probably somewhat familiar with screen readers, but it's crucial for us as developers and designers to understand exactly how they interact with the content that we create. So a screen reader doesn't see our beautifully designed slides and interactions. It can't perceive visual design elements at all. Instead, it reads and interprets the underlying code and structure that we build in our content. So let's break down what a screen reader can and cannot perceive. So a screen reader cannot perceive purely visual information. So things like color, it won't announce to the user what color something is. So we don't want to rely on that to provide meaning. It won't specify font styling. So if text is large, bold, or italicized for emphasis, it reads it just as any other text. And lastly, layout. It has no concept of an element's position on the screen. So, you can't refer to something on the top left corner or the right-hand side. Screen readers will not pick up on that. And so here's what screen readers can perceive. What they can perceive is the semantic structure that we provide in the code itself. So that's things like programmatic headings. So it will read and recognize properly coded headings like heading level 1, for instance. It will perceive formatted lists. So it announces lists when users get to them and announces the bullet points or the numbers of them. Alternative text, it will also read any alt text that we provide for our images. And lastly, it announces the purpose of buttons and links through their descriptive labels. So this is precisely why we can't rely on visual formatting alone to convey information. So to ensure our content is accessible, we must build that meaning into its fundamental structure. Okay, so let's start taking a look at some practical skills with building accessible e-learning. So to make our content understandable to assistive technology, we need to focus on 2 key areas, and that is building a logical structure and providing clear context for individual elements. So first, for the structure, as we were saying earlier, using true headings and lists is extremely important. So don't just rely on making text big and bold for a title or a heading. Use the built-in heading styles in your program. This creates a navigable outline that screen readers can use, or screen reader users can use to jump between sections, just like a sighted user would when they scan a page. Also, context is so important. Every meaningful image needs alternative text, which is concise, descriptive equivalent of what that image conveys. And similarly, link text or hyperlink text must make sense to a user on its own. And when I say on its own, I mean without the context of the rest of the slide. So, instead of using click here as your hyperlink text, do something like download the Q3 report, and the user will know exactly what that is, regardless of any other elements around it. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking. So we're now going to switch over to Storyline, and I'm going to sort of demo some of these ideas for you right now. Okay, I have pulled up a slide in Storyline 360 for us to take a look at here. All right, move this up a little bit. Perfect. Okay, let me see. Let me make this a little bit bigger too for everyone. Great. Okay, so we have a slide here. The heading is Common Fruits in the US. Underneath it is some text that says, a recent study found that these are the most common fruits eaten in the United States. And then it lists out apples, oranges, bananas, grapes. There's a bowl of fruit, a picture of a bowl of fruit. And then below it, it says, click here as a hyperlink for the survey results. So taking a look at sort of what we were just talking about in terms of the structure and context, let's go ahead and analyze some of the aspects here of this slide. So I'm going to take a look first at our title here for this slide, Common Fruits in the US. And if I click on the text box itself and go up to my styles, I notice that it's listed as normal text. This means that there's no heading assigned to this. So it's reading this text the same way it would read any other normal text here. But we want to make sure that this is considered the title or the heading. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to highlight this text and I'm going to select heading 1. And that will let screen readers know that this is what this page is, or this slide is about. And so you'll notice here that now that I've done that, it has changed the formatting of the text itself. If I wanted to, I could go back and just update, if I want to center it, if I want to change the font or bold it here, just for visual appeal, I can do that after the fact. But the most important part is that now this is assigned the heading level 1. This next text box is just normal text, and that's fine for these purposes. This is exactly as we would like it here. So now let's take a look at our list of fruits. We have apples, oranges, bananas, and grapes, and it's a bulleted list. And I'm using little star shapes for our list for a little design appeal. So you might notice here that each of these fruits is actually its own separate text box. Now here we have a problem because this, although visually is being read as a list, this is not programmatically a list. So a screen reader, when it gets to the section, will not recognize this as a list of 4 different fruits. So we need to fix that. So what I'm going to do is within the very first text box with the apples, I'm going to add the rest of the fruits here. Oranges, bananas, grapes. And I'm going to remove these text box here. So I have it all. So it's all within one text box here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that text and go back up to my styles area, and I'm going to create a bulleted list here. Now this again will provide the programmatic structure that we require here. Excuse me. And so now we have got our bulleted list. Well, let's fix this spelling here. All right. We can also, so now it doesn't line up with what we had here with our stars. So we can move and change our spacing, make everything work for us. Now let's say that you're really, and then also with our bullets, that does provide us some different options. So check marks, boxes, if we're not sold on bullet points. That said, if we're really want to use these shapes for our lists, what I would recommend doing is just moving those on top of the bullet points. Let's move. All right. So now we have the design choices that we'd like, but we're still using a programmatic list for this. Okay, moving on. We also have this bowl of fruit here on the page. So like we said, context is super important. we want to make sure that we're letting our users know any visuals that are on the screen. So we want to make sure that the alternative text is provided for any meaningful information. So I'm going to right click on this image and go down to accessibility. Might be cut off on my page here. Just a little bit bigger. Down here at the bottom, accessibility. And a window will pop up for my alt text. And so right now, the alternative text says fruit bowl photo 1.jpg. And that's just the file name for this image. Now, a screen reader user could probably pick up the context. Okay, I'm looking at a bowl of fruit in this picture, but .jpg is going to be annoying, especially if this happens throughout the training. So we could change this to bowl of fruit. And now we have a much better alternative text for the image. You can be more descriptive with this. I would say, and there's a nice tip here. You want to limit it to about 150 characters. You don't want super verbose alt text. And then on the other side, if that image is decorative or is not serving a purpose, like or conveying any real meaning. I mean, yes, this is a bowl of fruit here, but there's not real meaning being conveyed here. I can just uncheck this box, and screen readers will just skip over that when it reads the contents of that page. And lastly, down here, I have a text box that says click here for the survey results. And again, the click here is hyperlinked. As we talked about before, we want to avoid using things like click here or just vague terms with our hyperlinks. So be as specific as possible when it comes to hyperlinks, and think about if you just saw the hyperlink text itself, would you be able to understand what you're being linked to? And so right here, I'm going to change my link to 2025 fruit survey. And so now that lets users know that this link will take them to that. Okay. So that's a little bit of our demo here. Let me go back to our slides. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. Nancy had a great question here. Can you address AI or otherwise auto alt text generation tools? What best practices can we keep in mind when reviewing auto-generated alt text? That's a great question, Nancy. So you might find this with your tools that I know, especially in Microsoft Office, I'm starting to see this more in various other tools that these tools are providing AI-powered alt text for images. And what I would say about this is always review your alt text, regardless of whether you're inputting it or you are using auto-generated. It always requires you to review it. And the reason why is because with so much of this, context is so important. And so I actually had a training recently where we talked about alt text and how context is so important. And I had a picture of a house, and that house just says, describe what the house was. But then I pointed out that it was the house from Home Alone, and it had a very different context for users based on the fact that it was, this very specific movie and an iconic house. So that's what I would say when it comes to auto-generated alt text. Always review it every time. And we'll talk about how you can quickly go through and review your alt text as we go. Okay, I want to keep moving. So let's keep moving on here, and let's talk about keyboard navigation. So moving along, all of your courses need to be navigable by keyboard alone. This is super, super important. Probably if there's anything that I can have you leave today with, is that test all of your training with just using your keyboard without using your mouse. Every single interactive element, every single button, everything needs to be usable with just a keyboard alone. And This is something that is dependent on having a logical focus order that is built into your training. So this is the path that the little selection box takes as you press the tab key. So if you go to a web browser and press tab, you'll see it move along in order. To move backwards, you press shift and tab, and that will take you backwards. So usually it should go in a predictable or logical order. So that's usually left to right, top to bottom, just as you would normally read. And less important for, say, storyline, but that the focus indicator box that goes around everything should be visible for all selectable items. So if you can select it, it needs to be able to be visible. And we'll see here in a little bit, storyline automatically provides sort of a highlighted yellow box that goes around selectable elements. But you can also change the color and styling of that box to fit your needs. So, okay, let's do another demo. And for this one, I'm going to pull up a slide here. This slide says, select each button to learn more about the process. And then there are 4 buttons, steps 1 through 4. So very important to get the order right for this. So what I could do, if I'm testing just this slide alone, I can go and preview this slide. And as I was saying, I'm just going to press my tab key and I'm going to go through it. So I'm tab once. And so as you can see, we're highlighting the step 1 button. If I tab it again, notice it's gone to step 3. So it's not moving in the order that is logical, and is not moving in the order that I would like it to go. This is a step process. So we need to go in and fix this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to, I'm on the home ribbon, and I'm going to click on focus order. And from here, our focus order box is going to appear, and we can choose, it will provide us a default focus order, but we can click on create custom order if whatever they've provided for us is not what we've intended. And so I can take here, and as I click on each item, it's being highlighted on my slide. So I know exactly what they are all. So I'm going to move button step 2 up so it goes in front of step 3. And so now I've got my buttons in the correct order. Okay. And the other thing that we have here, if you notice, we have 2 other focusable icons. And these are things that won't be picked up when you just tab it with your keyboard, but it will be picked up with the screen reader. And that is there's a decorative rectangle sort of in the back that I'm using for decoration. And then the instructions that select each button to learn more about the process. So for that rectangle, that's not something I want users to focus on at all. So I could actually remove this from my focus order by going to the trash can. When I do this, it will do 2 things. One, it will remove it from my focus order, and it will also make the alt text, or uncheck the alt text box for that shape. So that way screen readers know to skip that shape. So also, because I want my users to read the directions and then go through the buttons, I'm going to move my text box all the way to the top. And so it's going to go instructions, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Okay, so that is a basic sort of understanding of how we use the focus order tool. It will get a little bit more complicated when we add in layers and interactions. We'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, moving on, let's talk about design. So, the best advice I can give, and this is something a lot of you probably already know, is before you start building a course, you want to sort of design a template for it. And when you do this, this is the template in which how your interactions are going to look, how your buttons are going to look, your heading styles, your fonts, all those things you want to design before you start implementing into your course. So when you do this, this is the time to figure out your color scheme and the palette that you're going to use for your colors. It's really important to make sure that the colors that you select are accessible and that there is enough color contrast for text and background images or background color so that they're viewable for all users. So what you're aiming for is a 4.5 to 1 contrast ratio from the text to the background. And so my recommendation for this is there are many different online color contrast checkers that are available. I have one called, what is it called? Accessible Color Picker. It's actually a browser extension. So this is always right here on my browser. And if I click on it, it opens up and I can test any colors against one another. So really, really important tool to use. So when you're picking your colors, so like let's say you're designing a button based on the color scheme that you provided. Don't forget to also check the ratios for the states of that button. So if you're going to include hover states or disabled states, make sure that the text still is readable with the color contrast tool. All right, so I do see we have a couple of comments and questions. I'm going to get to those hopefully as soon as I go through this. So let me just finish up here. I'll do a demo and we'll go back to those questions. So another quick thing is we talked about, since screen readers can't announce color, never use it to convey information. And then when we're using multimedia, it's quite simple when it comes to accessibility. All videos and meaningful audio need accurate synchronized captions. Absolutely, that is a must-have. Okay, so we're going to take a look back at Storyline, and I'm going to show you a little bit of demo here. And so we're going to build a button. And so let me just build this out real quick. So Storyline provides selectable button states here, or buttons here that I can use. I generally don't use those because they provide states that I don't always use. And but I'm going to create one with just by using a shape. Label it button. Make that a bit bigger. All right. So here's a button. Well, it's actually a shape. Let's make it a button now. All right. So I've made this a button. And when I click on this button, it will take us to the next slide. Okay. So let's first start by checking this color here. And so we've got white text and we've got a blue background for that button. Let's make sure that that is accessible. Now, this is the standard, like if you're creating a shape and Storyline, this is the standard color it will provide. So I know already, spoiler alert, that this will be accessible, but let's just do this as a test. So let me pull up this. Back to my Storyline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Format and Shape Fill, and I'm going to copy that color. So that is that blue color here. And so that's our background. Okay. And I know that my text is white, and the hex code for that is just FFF. Okay. So, oh, you know what? That's interesting. So this is the default state for creating a button. Let's just double check to make sure that text is absolutely white. Yep. All right. So using my color contrast tool, the actual default is not accessible because we're looking for a 4.5 to 1. And right now, this is a 4.033. So this is actually the background button color needs to be a little bit darker. Let's go ahead and fix that. And what I usually do is I'll pick the color and just sort of drag it down here. All right, let's see if this one is better. Color contrast tool. Ah, much better. Okay, so we have a nice button that has nice contrast. So now let's talk about hover states. So someone was asking about states in the chat. So this is a great tool in Storyline. So what I'm going to do right now is provide a new state that when a user hovers over it with their mouse, it will sort of change color. And what that does is that lets users know, hey, that's a button. So right now it's the same color, and I'm going to go ahead and change that color. And generally what I do, if the text of my button is a lighter color, like say a white, I tend to go darker on my hover states, because that way I know that the contrast will be better. Same way, if the text on my button is black, I usually go lighter. But this is a pretty dark. Let's see if that will change for me. See how this is. I'm going to again test this. And I know that this can be a little time consuming, just testing all of these states, but it's much, much better to test these states before you build your course. Okay, so this is accessible, great. Rather than going back and fixing every single button in your course. Okay, so now I've got a button that when I hover over it, it lets users know that it's a button by me hovering over it, and it's still nice and accessible. Okay. Great. So moving on. So I see I got some questions in the chat. Let me go back to this. So can I apply focus order for all interactive elements? I have a ton of drag and drop interactions. Okay, well, great question about drag and drop interactions. Generally speaking, so currently with the current version of Storyline, their general drag and drop activities are not considered accessible. Now, a lot of people have a lot of workarounds for this. I've seen a lot of different people, put together different types of triggers to, move objects based on, selection. But generally speaking, I tend to avoid drag and drop interactions just in general because it requires the use of a mouse. So I stick to interactions, click and reveal, multiple choice, things that I know that I can interact with on a keyboard. And generally speaking, most drag and drop interactions, whatever your sort of actionable goal is for your user, you can there's an alternative method for that. But that is something for a later date and time that we could talk about. Okay, so it looks like some other people were answering some questions in the chat, so thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and move on. Make this slow. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about user control. So this is an essential part of accessibility, and that's putting the user in control of their experience. So this means that you should never have slides that auto advance or have audio or video that autoplay. So why is this a problem? So it is a problem for screen reader users or someone using a magnifier. It will sometimes takes them longer to review the content on a slide. So if a slide auto advances, they can be pushed forward before they're ready. For learners with cognitive disabilities, it removes their ability to control the pace of information. That can cause anxiety or prevent them from absorbing the content. So luckily, in programs like Storyline, the slides automatically are advance via the user. So I can show you what that looks like here. I'm on my same button slide. If I go down to my slide properties and click on that, it says slide advances by, and we've got a drop down and it's selected by user. So we never want to have it selected as automatically. We want the user to be in control of that experience. Okay, so let's keep going. We're going to talk about some a little bit more advanced skills and concepts. Some of these will be specific to Storyline. Some of these won't be. So a big one to talk about, and it's something that I don't see enough people talk about in the e-learning space, is audio narration. So let's talk about the proper use of audio narration with our training materials. Audio can be great, a powerful tool, but it can also be a significant accessibility barrier if it's not implemented correctly. So here's some things to keep in mind. First, know this off the top. Audio narration is going to interfere with screen readers speaking to the user. There's going to be issues with the user hearing both the narration and the screen reader's voice simultaneously. So you want to be mindful of that and understand that from the get-go. Now, screen reader users can, they can mute their screen reader, or they can pause the audio if you have that enabled, which you should. But keep that in mind that's going to be something that might be a little bit, of a challenge for screen reader users. So again, this is another important reason why we don't want to have slides auto advance. So in most cases, screen reader users, if you have audio, they can listen to the audio and then they can navigate through the page content after that. You also want to avoid audio that simply reads the on-screen text word for word. While this might seem helpful and accessible, a lot of studies show that forcing users to both read and listen to the same content actually increases their cognitive load. So that's the mental effort. And by increasing that mental effort, it makes it harder for users to retain what they've learned. And also, it's just not a great user experience for people in general. So the most effective way, in my opinion, to an accessible approach is to use what's called a split channel method. And so in this method, the audio narration delivers the primary detailed information. The text on the screen, in turn, is not a full transcript, but it serves to sort of summarize or emphasize the key points of the audio. So similar to like what I'm doing right now, where I'm providing audio narration, but the screen is providing some nuance there. So what's important about this is for this method to be accessible, you must provide completely accurate synchronized captions for all of your narration. I'll show you a couple of examples of what that looks like in a moment. But again, super important. We always want to keep our keyboard accessible controls for the user in case they want to pause, stop, or replay any of that audio. Okay, so let me take a look. We'll take a look at how we show you a little demo of that audio. Okay, so on my screen, I have a slide. The heading says, "Welcome aboard," and then some text underneath it says, "This training module is structured into 3 key areas," and then it has a bunch of text below about all of those key areas. This slide itself does not have any audio. I just have some simple animations that, this is a basic Storyline slide. It's accessible via screen reader. Visual readers can read the slide and then click next and move on. If I wanted to change this into an audio slide with narration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let me just show you what this looks like here. So I've taken sort of the broad concepts of that slide and put it down into bullet points. And I took that bulk of that text and I created voiceover with it. And so I'm going to play that, not the whole thing because it's kind of long, but I'll play a little bit of this for you so you get an idea of what this looks like.
Welcome aboard. This training module is structured into 3 key areas. First, we will review our essential office policies. This will cover the day-to-day guidelines and procedures that ensure our workplace runs smoothly. Next, we'll dive into HR benefits. We'll walk you through the comprehensive package available to you and
Okay, so I want to pause it right there because we don't need to go through everything, but we sort of get the idea of what we're doing here. I'm providing some simple animation with arrows to sort of engage the visual focus, but also providing accurate closed captions as we go through here. So that's my approach when it comes to creating accessible e-learning audio. So I do see we have some questions in the chat. So let me just see. So what Emily says, when you're talking about audio narration, you're talking about that for asynchronous training. Yes. Yeah. So I'm talking specifically about creating asynchronous e-learning training. Yeah. Thank you. And then would you recommend that we provide an indication that the slides have audio, especially if not all slides have audio? That's a great question. And I would say it certainly wouldn't hurt. Sometimes I've seen this before where at the beginning of courses, there's a disclaimer. This course provides audio. This course includes audio, or sometimes there's an accessibility slide or a layer for folks for information on that. So I would say it's probably not necessary, but it certainly couldn't hurt. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some more advanced levels with our slides. And let's start by talking about layers and pop-ups. So layers are great ways to engage, or to create engagement, and also to limit the amount of text that's on screen. But one thing about them that we need to keep in mind is that they can be a common source of accessibility traps. And this is because screen readers do not automatically announce when a new layer or pop-up appears on the screen. So if you click on a button and a new layer appears, a sighted person sees that change, but there's no indication to a screen reader user. We can do a lot of things to improve that. And so one thing that I like to do with my trainings, and I did this first sort of just playing around, but then I realized that there's an accessibility component to that, is adding some subtle sound effects. Whether it's a soft whoosh or a pop, if something pops up on screen, this provides a non-visual cue that something has changed. There are tons of websites that have free sound effects that you could download for your training. My personal favorite is a site called Pixabay. That's Pixabay. And you could just Google, or you could search for whatever sound effect you want. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about here. So I have a slide here that says, click each button to learn more. And there's 3 buttons here. And you click on a button and a layer will pop up. So what I've done is I've included a small sound effect, little whoosh sound, for when users click on those buttons. And so here's sort of what it looks like. So I have my slide. I'm going to click on button 1. And so that whoosh sound sort of goes up with the flying animation. And it just gives a small signal to screen reader users that, hey, something has changed. So that's something that I do with my sound effects there. The next thing here that's really important with our layers is you want to also, I use the same sound for each button. It's the same whoosh sound. And that, it's not it's just a subtle effect to let users know what's going on. The next thing to remember with our layers, though, is your focus order, you want to make sure that it makes sense, because if I go to this again and I tab through it with my keyboard. So, okay, button 1, I'm going to select this button. Great, that works. So now I'm going to, what I want to do is select that back button. And so I'm going to tab again. And what happens is I'm actually not highlighting the back button. I'm highlighting the button 2. So now it's giving me layer 2. So I can't get out of this. So let me show you what's going on there and how we can fix that. So on your individual layers, you want to right click and select properties. And from here, there's a checkbox that says prevent the user from clicking on the other layers. And if I if I select this for each of my layers, then it will ignore any of the elements that are on that base layer and will only interact with what I have on that layer here. So now if I go back to it, highlight the first button, select it. I've got my back, works great. I've got button 2, works great. Button 3, works great. Okay, so this is, and I keep going back to it, but this is why testing with keyboard is so important. Honestly, when you're doing your QA, you might as well only test with keyboard because, chances are like there's not going to be an issue with it with using the mouse the way there would be with testing with keyboard. So we've got a couple of questions here, so let me take a look in the chat here. All right. In this example, with the screen reader audio overlap with the audio narration. Well, so I'm not sure, Tiff, which one you were, which slide you were talking about, but screen readers will, if there's new content that gets loaded on, they will just, start engaging with that content. So if you have audio that already starts when you load a page, then you'll have that talking on top of each other. And then Holly asks, can you please show your main focus order on this 3-button slide? Sure, happy to do that. Okay, so let me go up to my focus order. Let's cut off there a little bit. So focus order looks a little bit different when you start using layers because we have different layers. Each of these, so we've got layer 3, layer 2, layer 1. And so here is my, for the base layer, we've got the text box, and then button 1, button 2, button 3. Oh, another thing here, and this is, if you use groups, it's also important when you take a look at your focus order. So this layer, this is a shape. We've got text, we've got our button. I've grouped them together for the sake of this animation, but know that when you create a group, you're creating another focusable element. So what I generally do, and this is again, as I go and check my focus order for my slide, is this group, like all of the contents that I want the screen reader to engage with are here. I'm going to just delete the group itself. So it's only going to focus on these. So I tend to, as soon as I see groups, I take them out of the focus order and just focus on the elements themselves, because that group is not going to provide other information other than, the label of it as a group. Okay, so Tiff says the previous one with the HR info. Yes, it would talk over it. And that is, that's the case where, one would either, pause the recording or pause the audio or pause their screen reader. And on screen readers like NVDA, there are certain key commands to pause it. Like NVDA is caps lock, and that sort of mutes it for a moment. And then Roxana says you can set it to stop the narration on the main layer when they click a button so that their narration on the buttons layer takes over. Okay, great. Tish says, what about JAWS? So I'm not a JAWS user, so I don't know exactly what the keyboard command is on JAWS. I test with NVDA for mine because I work in state government, and we like to use the free open source programs when possible. So, all right, moving on. So I want to be cognizant of time here. So I'm going to go back to our slides. And also, if folks have other questions after we get through today's training, happy to stay on and answer questions anyone has. Okay, so my last sort of advanced skill is about experimenting with states. We talked about the hover state earlier, but if you're familiar with states, if you use them in your training, this is sort of an advanced technique that provides information to users. So we can change the design of a button to let users know when a button has been clicked on or visited, and that a lot of time we'll do that with a check mark or something like that. Now that information, that's visual information for the user, but that is not provided to the screen reader user. So I want to show you how we update our states to reflect that. And we can do that by updating the alt text. So here I have the same slide. And in this slide, this time, it's the same slide. Only difference is once I've visited or clicked on a button, I now have a green check mark on top of it. And this is useful if you're creating a training where you want users to click on every button before they can move on to the next slide. So this lets people keep track. Okay, I've clicked on button 1, button 2. But like I said, this is visual information. So how do we reflect that for screen readers? And so what we can do is if I select that button 1 and go to that state. So notice I've got all these different states for my button, and my visited state has that check mark over it. So right now, if I right-click my button and look at our alt text, it's properly labeled as button 1, which it is here. However, if I go to edit states and click on visited, I could now right-click and add alt text, and I could change that button 1 alt text to button 1 visited. In this way, if I've already gone to it, I can go back with the screen reader and it will say button 1 visited. Just to make sure, let's go back to our button 1, our normal state. And so we've got button 1. If I click on visited, we've got visited. Okay, so that is a way that we can provide the same information, the same feedback to our screen reader users. So highly, highly recommend doing that. I also want you to be mindful of when you do use like icons like this to change your states, that now, so I've added a check mark to this. Notice that this check icon also has alt text. So if you don't want the screen reader to read check icon 1, I would uncheck that. So what I've done is I've updated the alt text for the button itself to say button 1 visited. But then I've removed the alt text from the check mark so it doesn't say check mark icon every time. And context clues for a screen reader user might say, okay, check mark, button 1, check mark icon. Sounds like I've already checked on that one. But depending on what you're using, that may not be clear. I much prefer updating the alt text of the button itself. Okay. So we've put together our training. We've put in a bunch of different accessibility work. Now we have to test it. And I recommend a simple 3-step process with testing. First, start by using the built-in accessibility checker that comes in your program. This is for first pass stuff. This is a great way to mark different shapes as decorative, making sure that the alt text that is provided makes sense for the context. Very important here. It's great for catching those things. Storyline just recently released a new version that has an accessibility checker, and I've been thrilled with it. I've been super, super happy. It's something that has been needed for a very long time. So I would start by doing that. The next thing, and again, this is the most, if there's one thing that you're leaving today with, is test with your keyboard. Can you get through the entire course? Can you manipulate all of the interactions with just your keyboard? Always, always test. And last but not least, if you can, do a screen reader spot check. I recommend, so someone was asking about JAWS. So I use NVDA, which is an open source PC-based screen reader. If you're on Mac, you have VoiceOver that's already available for you. With this, you don't need to be an expert, but if you just turn it on and go through some slides, make sure that it all makes sense, that it's reading the things that you want it to read and not some of the things that you don't want it to read. So that's often a time where you'll find, like, why is it reading icon 3? I don't want it to read that. And so you could remove those things. And so here in Storyline, I'm going to show you sort of the accessibility checker that they have. So you can access this 2 ways. First way is, so when you go to publish a course, the checker will be provided for you. But again, this is not how you should be developing your training. You shouldn't develop a training and then say, okay, I'm going to go back and make it accessible. You should do this as you go. So if you click on View and then Accessibility Checker, your accessibility checker window will pop up. And this provides you a list of things that for you to check. And what's great is that it's separated by the levels from WCAG. So level A, these are the most important critical issues. And then level AA, that's the required but not as important. And then level AAA, this is things that would be the gold standard for accessibility. So here at level A, I've got 26 issues found. So these are things that I definitely need to fix. So this is for all of the slides that I have here. But if you want to just focus on the current slide that you're on, so if you're building it from slide to slide, this is a much easier, more palatable way to sort of build accessibility into your process, making sure that you've got your text styles defined, making sure that your alt text is correct. So right here, I have alt text for this button icon. I don't want this to read that, so I'm just going to uncheck that. Same thing here. I don't want to read that. Great. And then, like we showed earlier, I have layers that are grouped. I don't want it to read those groups. I'm just going to get rid of that. Group, group, group. Don't want to read that. Okay. So that's the accessibility checker there. And like I said, it will also come when you go to publish your course. So to wrap up, and I'm going to be cognizant of time right now, the goal here is to make accessibility a proactive part of your training design process, not reactive at the end. But if you're thinking about these principles from the start, you're going to make better courses. So I want to leave you today with a couple of resources that we have here. The first thing I have is the Maryland eLearning Accessibility Guidelines. This is guidelines that my office developed to help both internal and external stakeholders building courses for the state of Maryland, making sure that they build those with accessibility in mind. Yes, I will be, Nicole, I'll be sending the slides out if you didn't get those yet. So I'll post links in those. The next link there is the Articulate Storyline 360 accessibility features. That's a link to an article that Storyline has on their website. Just goes over some of the things we talked about here and some other functionality. Next, I have my office's website, the IT Accessibility Initiative. So there's more resources for digital accessibility. It also gives you an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter to find out about other training offerings we have available. And last but not least, we have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines by the W3C. This is just a link to those guidelines for the 2.1 guidelines right now. So covered a lot of content today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm going to go back to the chat and see if there's any questions that I missed and go through that. But otherwise, I appreciate everyone for joining us today. And if you had a question, I'm going to go up here and see if I can address anything else. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So thank you.